With over 80 projects designed worldwide, the Forma Towers in Toronto will be one of the tallest skyscrapers that Frank Gehry has designed till now. This project has been in the works since 2012. That's right. Over 10 years in the making. Frank Gehry, at the time when the project started, he was 83 years old. He is now 93 years old, and the project is finally moving forward with one of the penthouses selling for over $20 million. But what was Gehry's inspiration behind the project? Why did the project take so long, and how did the project evolve throughout that process? And what is the story behind how the project got started? Well, in this video, I'm going to be answering those questions. So if you're interested, let's get started. The project is located in the city of Toronto along King Street West, and it's located between Spadina and University Street. Now, this project will mark the second project that Frank Gehry has designed for the city of Toronto. His first project was the Art Gallery of Ontario, the AGO, which is my personal favorite building in the city of Toronto. I really love it. It's subtle but yet bold, and you have that curved facade across the front which faces Dundas Street. Now, his first skyscraper was designed in Manhattan, New York at 76 stories. So this project is gonna be his tallest. It's gonna beat the New York skyscraper. And the project consists of two towers, one at 73 stories and the other at 84 stories. And the project is mixed use. It has office spaces and so on. So basically the West Tower has a 4-level podium of retail space with a mezzanine level, and then 4 levels of office space with condo amenities on the top level of the podium. And the building slightly overhangs over the Princess of Wales Theatre to the west. And the East Tower podium includes 3 levels of retail with a mezzanine level with 2 levels for the OCAD University. The first 2 levels of the podium, similar to the West Tower, contains amenities with a terrace on top of the podium for outdoor amenities. And then the towers contain the residential units over top. So in total, there's 2,034 units in the overall development. This includes studio spaces all the way to 3 bedrooms plus dens. And occupancy is planned for 2028. As I mentioned, units have already started to sell, including Frank Gehry, who also bought a unit within the building. Now, the towers are uniquely sculpted to maximize the views. So Frank Gehry really looked at sculpting and twisting and tilting the shapes and forms in order to maximize views. So everyone is getting a unique and different view of the city, which I find so exciting because not only does it make the development have so much more movement and it looks so much more exciting, but it also has been rationalized in such a way that you're maximizing views and daylight for all of the units. So what is the story behind how the project got started? Well, the project started back in 2012 with the developer David Mirvish. Now, David Mirvish was a theater producer and an art collector, and his father was Ed Mirvish, who was a long-time friend of Frank Gehry. So Ed began acquiring downtown property in Toronto about half a century ago. So in 1993, Ed and David Mirvish opened the Princess of Wales Theatre, which is where the proposal is located. And so this theatre was considered the first freestanding, privately financed theatre to be built in Canada. And Ed Mirvish was known for his Honest Ed's, which was a discount department store. Now, I have found memories of that department store because I also grew up in Toronto and I was born in Toronto, and my parents immigrated to the country. So we were all on a budget. And so we would shop at that department store. And I remember getting lost in the department store, and it had such a unique character to it, and sadly it's been demolished, and I actually went and visited before it got demolished, and it was quite sad. It still had so much character till the day it got demolished. Now, the initial proposal with David Mirvish included 3 towers, and so when the city saw the 3 towers, it received a lot of vocal opposition from city planners. They felt that it was too dense and that it was too crowded and too tall as well. Now, the initial proposal also included the demolishing of the Princess of Wales Theatre, which I have to say was shocking as well. When I heard of the proposal that they wanted to demolish it, that was really sad to hear, especially coming from David Mirvish, where they actually opened and started that theater. And there's so much character in that theater as well. So it was shocking to everyone. After receiving those comments, Mirvish and Frank Gehry revised the proposal to include and to save the theater. And it also reduced the amount of towers. So it went from 3 towers down to 2 towers. And this proposal won city approval in 2014. However, because this was a 10-year process, Mirvish actually sold the development during that time. So after receiving approval from the city, they sold the development to new developers. And this included Great Golf and Westdale, along with Dream Corporation. And so this was sold in 2017. Now, with the new partnership, that also changes things. And as time is going, things are changing as well in the city of Toronto. So this involved for Frank Gehry to also adapt and change the proposal as well. And so the proposal evolved with these events. And as he said to Globe and Mail, we started working on Forma about 10 years ago with David Mirvish. And David had his own values and desires for the project. The current partnership with Great Golf Group, Dream, and Westdale Properties has its own vision for the project, along with some of its own financial realities. Toronto has changed a lot in the last decade, and with it, the way people think about housing as well. So the project had to change with it. So this was a process, and Frank Gehry adapted to the times. He adapted to the market. He adapted to the client needs and the shifting demands of changing of partnerships. And those changes as well helped to bring the project together. And so it's interesting to see how the project has evolved in those 10 years and all of the different events that helped shape it as well. This is a special project for Frank Gehry. He was born in Toronto back in 1929. And he grew up in Toronto until his teens, where he moved with his family to LA. And in LA, he got his first job driving a delivery truck in order to support his family. And in the evenings, he would be attending classes and trying to complete his studies in Los Angeles City College. And upon taking a ceramic class in the evening, his instructor told Frank, "This is not for you. You should do something different. Why don't you enroll in an architecture class?" And so he did. He enrolled in an architecture class in the evening, and honestly, the rest was history, because then he went to the University of Southern California and he completed his bachelor's in architecture. And that led for him to do his master's as well at Harvard University. And it came with a bit of disappointment when he did complete his master's, but that all led him to become an architect. And it led him to also want to do something that had more of a human aspect to it. He wanted to make sure that his buildings created a strong emotion. It made you feel something. One of the buildings that he visited made him cry, and he said to himself, that's what he wants to achieve with his buildings and architecture. He wants you to have a strong emotion. So for Gehry, returning back to his hometown where he grew up, this was a special project for him. And I can feel that from watching his interview and one of the videos he put together for the development, where he's showing off the model of the development. And I can see it in his eyes and just the way he's moving the model around and looking at it. I can see how it's so special for him and how he feels a responsibility by the project for everyone in Toronto. I feel that he's really proud to be giving this landmark for Toronto. And in his interview with the Globe and Mail, he mentioned this: "Building in my hometown is very special. It is an honor that the city has entrusted me with such an important and special site. I will do my best to make it the best building that I can." And he was inspired by the city itself, by the traditional architecture of Toronto. And this included the Osgoode Hall, University Avenue, which is also one of my favorites, Parliament Buildings, and the Royal York Hotel. For him, every city in the world has its own light, and the light is modified by the buildings in the city. I wanted this building to capture the essence of Toronto. It's not like everywhere else. The light is different. The heritage is different. It's a different place. I hope that this is what people see when they look up. So he's excited to share this with Toronto, and it's so exciting to see Frank Gehry come back to Toronto and be a part of the city again and bring us this landmark as well. In terms of the materials, Frank Gehry has really been exploring the materials for it, and this is what he said. The variety of materials was important, so the buildings don't read like every other skyline glass thing. I couldn't agree anymore. That's something that we don't need more in Toronto, is more fully glass boxes. So it's great to see how he brought in some movement into the buildings, and he also is playing with materiality. Now, Frank Gehry's work brings a lot of emotions and critics. Now, some of you might love his work and his buildings, and some of you might despise it. But the one thing I really appreciate about Frank Gehry's work and his buildings is that they push the boundaries of architecture. They bring out an emotion, good or bad, and they also bring movement. I always feel that his work brings the art of architecture back. It's bold, it's unique. It makes it special, and it feels special. And this is something that you don't see often in a lot of buildings. And so for that, I have immense respect and appreciation for his work. And I think many people also have the same feeling about his work, because despite there being a possible recession coming and increasing inflation rates, the units are selling and they're doing quite well. And so there seems to be a connection that people are having with the building. Now, of course, they can afford it as well because the prices are kind of pricey, but there is a desire for people to be a part of the building and to want to experience what it is to live in the building and to experience the different views and all those special moments that have been crafted by Frank Gehry. And so this really brings home how important architecture is and what architecture can potentially do. So despite there being financial stresses happening, things are still moving and there's still a desire for people to be a part of it. And I really loved what Frank Gehry had to say in his interview with the Globe and Mail here, where they had asked him, what does great architecture do for the city? How does it benefit a city? And he talked about celebrating the 25th anniversary of Bilbao in Spain, his Guggenheim Museum, which has now reached 25 years. And so the building at the time cost $100 million. Now the design is very unique and it was quite costly. So in comparison to some of the other proposals on the table, I'm sure that that wasn't the most conservative option from the price and the design. But they made the decision to go with Frank Gehry's design. It brought an energy to the city, and it brought a lot of people. It brought curiosity to the city. And so people now visit the museum for the architecture. And yes, it cost $100 million at the time, but they have made that money in return a long time ago. After 25 years, they still receive 1.5 million people a year visiting. So it was a worthwhile investment. So when the architecture has such a strong meaning and story behind it, people are excited about it. They want to be a part of it. They want to see it. And so it's such an important story to remember when you're also working on your designs or when you're experiencing architecture itself, how important buildings and architecture is to our city and to our culture. And if you'd like to see more content similar to this video, I did a video on Renzo piano, which you might be interested in, and you can see it here. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe. I hope to see you on the next video. Until then, bye everyone.